All right, welcome back to the deep dive. We all know you guys are busy out there and we respect your time.
Yeah,
So we promise to always get right to the point.
that's right, the good stuff, the insights.
We'll always bring you the crucial information without bogging you down in a mountain of irrelevant details. You ready to dive in?
Let's do it. Today we're diving deep into a criminal complaint. This one was filed in the Central District of California.
Okay.
So we're talking Southern California. And it's pretty heavy stuff. This document lays out an FBI investigation.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, not speculation or news reports or anything like that. This is straight from the court. It's a serious set of allegations.
This isn't some tabloid story, folks. This is the real deal.
Yeah.
And who's at the center of this investigation?
It's a guy named Eugene Henley, Jr. You might know him as Big U.
Big U, okay?
And the FBI is calling this whole operation the Big U Enterprise.
All right, so the Big U Enterprise. Now, we always like to be upfront about our sources here. For this deep dive, we're focusing exclusively on this criminal complaint.
Exactly. That's our primary source.
That's our Bible for today, folks. So what's our goal here? What do we want to help our listeners understand by the end of this deep dive?
So the complaint itself, it's a big document, lots of detail. But we're going to sift through it all for you. We're going to pull out the core accusations against Henley.
All right, I'm ready. Lay it on me.
And we'll try to make sense of this Big U Enterprise. You know, how it allegedly worked, what it was all about, all based on what the FBI is claiming in this document.
Okay, so let's start with the basics. Who are we dealing with here? Who are these major players named in the complaint?
Well, you got Eugene Henley, Jr., Big U himself, right at the center of it all. But it doesn't stop there. There are a bunch of other defendants named too.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. We've got Sylvester Robinson, Mark Martin, Tremaine Ashley Williams,
Yeah.
Armani Aflel, Frederick Blanton, Jr., and Tiffany Shinrika Hines.
Okay, so a whole crew here.
A whole network. And the complaint goes into detail about their alleged roles in all of this as we dig in deeper.
Okay, so Big U, not just some random guy off the street,
Right.
you know.
Oh, not at all. The complaint, it paints him as a pretty formidable figure. They say he's a purported former enforcer for the Rollin' 60s, a powerful street gang. And that's not all. They say he has a, shall we say, a well-documented history of violence.
So already not someone you want to mess with.
Definitely not. The complaint emphasizes his connection to the Rollin' 60s. They're saying he used that reputation, that history of violence, to basically give him the clout to run this whole Big U enterprise.
Okay, so power and intimidation, part of his MO.
Right. And here's another layer to it.
Mm-hmm.
The complaint mentions that in past interviews, Henley has actually compared himself to, get this, a modern-day mafia figure.
Whoa, okay. That's a bold claim.
It is, and it suggests how he views himself. He's not shying away from that image.
Okay, so we've got a powerful figure with a history of violence and sees himself as some sort of mob boss. This is getting intense.
Oh, yeah. And now we get to the meat of it. The complaint lays out a laundry list of alleged criminal activity. And I'm talking a wide range from violent felonies to some pretty sophisticated financial fraud.
Okay, so give it to me straight. What are the big ones? What are the most serious allegations against Big U and this enterprise?
We're talking about murder, kidnapping, robbery, extortion. And then they get into interstate transportation for prostitution. That involved the Mann Act. Then there's wire fraud, bank fraud, and even tax offenses.
Whoa, that's a rap sheet.
And it doesn't stop there. The complaint also claims that members of the enterprise tried to throw off the FBI's investigation to cover their tracks.
Okay, so we're already seeing a pattern here. Intimidation, violence, and then trying to hide it all.
Exactly.
Now, there's this thing called the check-in that's mentioned in the complaint. This sounds particularly strange. Can you break that down for us? What was this check-in all about?
So this check-in was something Henley supposedly started, and it mainly targeted hip-hop artists and celebrities visiting L.A.
So, like a welcome to LA, but not in a nice way.
Not exactly. The complaint makes it sound like these folks were expected to get permission to pay tribute to Big U and his crew.
You've got to be kidding me. They had to pay to be in LA.
That's what the FBI is alleging, almost like a toll. And the complaint even quotes Dr. Dre. Remember that docuseries where he talked about the value of having an OG to clear the streets?
Yeah.
Well, the complaint ties that right into this check-in. They're saying Big U used his OG status, his tough guy image, to make people think he owned L.A. And they quote someone saying, not one human being who not gonna check in.
So basically, they're saying he was running a protection racket.
That's what it sounds like. He's playing on fear and this idea of respect, but it's all about control.
It's like a twisted version of hospitality.
Right. And complaint goes on to say that Henley also tried to present himself as a legitimate figure, a pillar of the community.
So he's playing both sides.
Apparently so.
Yeah.
He set up nonprofits, like developing options, they say.
Mm-hmm.
And he was asking celebrities for donations, trying to get grant money.
So on one hand, this fearsome gangster, and on the other, a philanthropist. That's a weird mix.
It is. But the complaint suggests it was deliberate. Maybe a way to deflect suspicion, to gain influence. It's like a classic tactic, honestly. You see it in organized crime sometimes.
A wolf in sheep's clothing.
Yeah, that's one way to put it.
Okay, let's move on to the specific allegations. The complaint talks about the murder of someone they're calling R.W. What happened there?
This is where things get really dark. The complaint claims Henley murdered R.W. in Las Vegas back in January 2021. They found his body in the desert. Multiple gunshot wounds.
Brutal.
And the complaint says it was all about retaliation. They say R.W. had made a diss track, a song disrespecting Big U and the Enterprise.
So someone spoke out of turn and paid the ultimate price.
That's the implication. And it gets even creepier. The complaint actually quotes some of the lyrics. It talks about getting shot in the face and a .38 revolver with no trace.
Geez, talk about foreshadowing. But how did they tie Henley to this? What's the evidence?
They've got travel records. They say Henley and Sylvester Robinson went to Vegas together in a dark gray Lexus. And there's a witness, they call him Witness 1, who saw Henley and Robinson at a recording studio in Vegas, said they were acting strangely.
Suspicious behavior.
Yeah. And then there's the phone records. The complaint details cell phone location data for phones they say belong to Henley. And guess what? Around the time of the murder, the location data just stops for a while. And when it comes back online, it lines up with the estimated time it would have taken to travel to where the body was found.
So the phone's going silent, almost as incriminating as if they'd caught him on camera.
Exactly. And you know what's ironic? The complaint actually quotes Henley himself from a Drink Champs interview.
Huh?
He says, phones tell all about where you've been.
Yeah, well, his actions seem to contradict his words in this case.
For sure. And Witness 1, remember them? They said when Henley got back to the studio, he was soaking wet. Claimed he'd been at the gym.
In the middle of the night. That's a little hard to believe.
Seems that way.
What about physical evidence from the crime scene itself?
They found DNA on R.W.'s ankle and sock. They think he was dragged. The DNA wasn't conclusive. They couldn't definitively link it to Henley. But they did rule out Robinson.
Okay, so not a smoking gun, but it doesn't help his case either.
Nope. And there's more. After the murder, the complaint says recording equipment disappeared from the studio and security cameras were suddenly disabled.
Sounds like a cover-up.
That's what it looks like.
Did the FBI talk to anyone who knew R.W.? Did they have any suspicions?
They did. The complaint says they talked to his family and friends, and they all pointed the finger at Henley. And get this, R.W. sent Henley an Instagram message right before he disappeared. And Henley never responded, which was totally out of character for them.
Interesting. So a sudden change in communication.
Exactly.
Now, the complaint mentions intercepted communications, wiretaps. What did those reveal?
Yeah, so the FBI was listening in on Henley and his crew in 2023, and they caught them talking about the investigation into R.W.'s death. Yeah, pretty much. Apparently, detectives went to Henley's house, and he freaked out. He didn't go home for 2 weeks, made Robinson drive his car around, and in one call, Henley straight up tells Martin he wants to meet face-to-face because he thinks the feds are tapping his phone.
So he knew they were onto him.
It seems so.
Wow, okay. So we've covered murder, intimidation, cover-ups. But what about the financial crimes? The complaint goes deep on robbery and extortion too, right?
It does, and they suggest that this was another big part of how the Big U enterprise operated. It was about money and maintaining their control.
All right, break it down for us.
Well, they talk about this robbery of an unlicensed marijuana dispensary that went down on July 5, 2021. And the victim, they call him Victim 1, he'd been paying the Big U enterprise protection money for years.
Extortion, classic mob tactic.
Right. And guess who was allegedly involved in the actual robbery? Sylvester Robinson and Tremaine Ashley Williams.
Figures.
And here's the kicker. During the robbery, they made the victim call Henley.
So like rubbing it in his face.
Exactly. Showing him who's boss. And afterward, they actually returned some of the stolen money. The complaint suggests it was a way to keep the victim in their pocket, to set him up for more extortion later.
So calculated.
Oh yeah, very strategic.
And it gets even wilder. The complaint says Tremaine Ashley Williams basically confessed to this robbery on a podcast.
You're not kidding. He went on the No Jumper podcast and spilled the beans.
Oh,
Talked about the robbery, talked about how Henley would return some of the money as a manipulation tactic. And then, guess what? The episode got taken down after a cease and desist.
Wow. Damage control.
Seems like it. But even after saying he wasn't with Big U anymore, Williams kept making threats and talking about robberies.
He couldn't help himself.
Apparently not. There was an alleged assault outside where they filmed No Jumper. He even posted a YouTube video threatening violence and talking about robbing celebrities who didn't check in.
He was still playing the game.
Yeah, and he didn't stop there. He claimed he was with Henley when rapper PNB Rock was robbed and murdered. And he even talked about kidnapping a famous rapper. Said he was with Henley for that too.
These guys weren't exactly keeping a low profile.
Not at all.
Yeah.
And the feds were listening. The complaint details intercepted calls where Robinson uses the slang lick for robbery and talks about taking over victim one's dispensary. And there's this crazy story where Henley, Mark Martin, and others supposedly staged a fake robbery to get back stolen equipment from a celebrity rapper. They even caught Henley and another guy, Zahir Mitchell, a.k.a. Brick Baby, on the phone, allegedly talking about splitting the loot from some robberies.
So these robberies, they weren't just random acts. They were planned, organized.
That's what the complaint suggests. And they weren't just going after anyone. They targeted people they knew they could exploit.
Like victim one, they really went after him, didn't they?
They did. The complaint lays out years of extortion. They've got recordings of phone calls, payment records, dates, amounts, the whole 9 yards.
This poor guy.
Robinson even told him straight up that the payments were like a retainer fee for protection.
Protection from the very people who were robbing him.
Exactly. That's the twisted logic.
And the complaint details this incident at Deja Vu, Henley's birthday party. What happened there?
So Henley throws this birthday bash at Deja Vu, and he makes a deal with the owner for a cut of the profits. Then he gets greedy and starts making threats, saying he wants all the money. He demands 30 grand in cash plus a percentage of the bar's future earnings. The complaint even quotes some of his phone calls, and they say his threats were super aggressive.
So much for a happy birthday.
Yeah, not exactly a celebratory mood.
The complaint also alleges that Henley was involved in prostitution, specifically interstate transportation for prostitution. And it mentions the Mann Act. Can you explain what that is for those who might not know?
Sure. The Mann Act is a federal law that basically makes it illegal to transport women across state lines for the purpose of prostitution. So the complaint is alleging that Henley and Armani Afflel were running some kind of prostitution ring, bringing women from California to Vegas.
And what evidence do they have to support these allegations?
Well, they've got those wiretaps again. The complaint mentions intercepted calls between Henley and Afflel. In one call, they're allegedly talking about making women get naked and perform sexual acts. Pretty explicit stuff. And they also have a witness, a woman who says she transported other women from California to Vegas for prostitution and that she was paid $1,000 by Henley to do it.
Wow, that's pretty damning.
It is. So we've got murder, extortion, robbery, prostitution. And it doesn't stop there. The complaint also accuses Henley and his associates of a whole bunch of financial crimes.
Right, we talked about the violence and intimidation, but this is a whole other level of criminal enterprise.
Absolutely.
What were they up to on the financial side of things?
Well, for starters, they alleged that Henley committed fraud to get a COVID relief loan.
Oh, no, not that.
Yeah, the complaint claims he got a $90,000 loan through his music company, Unique Music, by lying about their revenue. They say he inflated the numbers to make it seem like his business was hurting more than it was.
So taking advantage of a program meant to help struggling businesses.
That's the allegation. And it gets worse. They say he was embezzling money from his own charity, Developing Options.
You've got to be kidding me. Stealing from a charity.
That's what they're saying. The complaint lists specific donors and amounts, tens of thousands of dollars, that were supposed to go to things like youth football and social justice programs. But the money allegedly ended up in Henley's personal accounts.
So much for community betterment.
Yeah, not exactly living up to the mission statement. And there's more. The complaint accuses Henley, Mark Martin, Frederick Blanton Jr., and Tiffany Shanrika Hines of bank fraud. They supposedly cooked Blanton's income record so he could qualify for a bigger mortgage than he deserved.
So they were manipulating the system left and right.
Seems that way. Yeah, and of course, where there's financial fraud, there's often tax fraud. The complaint accuses Henley of not reporting the money he allegedly embezzled from Developing Options, which means he was dodging taxes, too.
This guy thought he was above the law.
It certainly seems that way. But the FBI was watching, and they were building their case. And the complaint doesn't just focus on these big headline-grabbing crimes. It also mentions a bunch of other shady dealings.
Like what? Give us some examples.
Well, they say Henley tried to strong-arm a witness in an assault case involving one of his associates,
Oh, wow. Obstruction of justice.
basically. The FBI had wiretaps on Henley, and they caught him telling the victim's relative to pressure the victim into picking the wrong guy in a lineup. He even coached the relative on a fake story to tell the cops.
Jeez. So he was trying to control every aspect of this case.
It seems so. And then there are all the threats. The complaint mentions tons of intercepted calls where Henley's bragging about violence and making threats against people who crossed him. It's all about creating this atmosphere of fear, of showing everyone who's in charge.
Yeah, that's a recurring theme here.
Definitely. And they even mentioned an incident where Robinson is talking about threats made to someone called Jew Boy. It's pretty disturbing.
So they're not just threatening rivals or enemies. They're going after anyone they perceive as a threat, even someone with a nickname like Jew Boy.
It paints a pretty bleak picture of how they operated.
So after building this massive case, where did the FBI go from there?
Well, the complaint lays out all the places they wanted to search for evidence. They wanted to search Henley himself, his Mercedes, both his houses in L.A. They wanted to search Sylvester Robinson and his place in Northridge, Mark Martin and his place in L.A., and the Developing Options Office on Crenshaw Boulevard.
So they were casting a wide net.
They were. And the complaint goes into detail about why they believed these specific locations would have evidence. They talk about surveillance they conducted, financial records they obtained, the content of the wiretaps, all sorts of things.
So they had to connect the dots, show the judge they had good reason to believe these places held evidence of the crimes.
Exactly. And they use everything. Phone location data, eyewitness accounts, surveillance footage. They even mentioned that they saw Henley and Robinson at their respective homes, and Henley driving his Mercedes. The complaint says that Henley's Arlington property was allegedly used for illegal activities separate from his main residence. They say they have evidence that the Developing Options location on Crenshaw Boulevard is their current address, and that it was being used for fraudulent activities.
So it's not just about speculation. They're providing concrete reasons why they want to search these places.
Exactly. They're not just throwing darts at a map. And the complaint goes even further. They say they want to search digital devices, even use biometric features to unlock them if they have to. They argue that this is necessary because of the nature of the crimes and the evidence they've already gathered. And they mentioned that they had already tried to subpoena data related to the investigation, so they knew there was more digital evidence out there.
It's pretty comprehensive.
It is.
And just to reiterate for our listeners, everything we've talked about today comes directly from this criminal complaint.
Yeah.
We haven't added any speculation or conjecture. We've presented the information as it is laid out in the document.
That's right. It's crucial to remember that these are allegations, and Henley and his associates are innocent until proven guilty. But this complaint gives us a very detailed glimpse into the FBI's investigation, and it's a pretty disturbing picture.
Yeah, there's no sugarcoating it. This deep dive has definitely delivered some of those aha moments we promise, even if they're more unsettling than exciting in this case. This whole case really makes you think, doesn't it?
It does. You've got this guy allegedly running a criminal enterprise involved in violence and fraud, but he's also trying to build this image as community leader, a philanthropist. And it makes you wonder how many other people are out there doing the same thing. How many organizations are hiding behind a facade of good intentions while secretly engaging in criminal activity? It's a pretty sobering thought.
It is. It's a reminder that things aren't always what they seem. And it makes you question, who can you trust?
Absolutely. And that's something we're thinking about long after this deep dive is over.
Thanks for listening, everyone, and we'll catch you next time.
See you then.